Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphan Last, aka Skylar Madison, and today I'm going to go ahead and draw out a cityscape. I've gotten this as a little bit of a request. I've seen a couple of subscribers struggling with drawing cityscapes, and they were requesting, hey, do you have any videos on it at all? And so basically I'm thinking about having a series of videos where I'm practicing drawing cityscapes with 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point perspective, maybe a little bit with curvilinear perspective, and then once I feel like I've gotten enough practice with it, I can go ahead and just delve right into it in terms of like not just describing, okay, so this is how you get the camera angle that you want, or approximately what you think you want at least, and then progressing on to basically describing each and every single line that I'm drawing, the logic behind it and such like that, to try to get people accustomed to the thought process, at least my thought process, in drawing a cityscape and such like that. Now, at the very beginning of the video, you saw me kind of work out with a thumbnail and such. I suppose, like normally when you make multiple different thumbnails and such, and you're making different versions of the same sort of composition or idea, what you're normally doing is you're like, okay, so the 1-point perspective version of this image is, and then you go ahead and draw out that thumbnail. Okay, so the 2-point perspective version of this image is, and then you draw that one out as a separate thumbnail. And then you pick your favorite one as you progress from 1-point, 2-point, 3-point, maybe 4-point and 5-point, stuff like that. But basically, yeah, this image actually posed a lot of difficulty with me. Like, there's a lot of measurements, and there were times where I actually wound up making a ton of measurements, and then I wound up erasing every last measurement because I lost track of where I was, and then I had to start all the way over again trying a different approach. That would fail, and then I'd erase all of the measurements again. We're talking about 15 minutes worth of work, and then doing another 15 minutes of work and erasing both 15 minutes of work, so 30 minutes lost here and there occasionally. So this is about 5 hours worth of work. But yeah, to kind of backtrack a little bit, I knew that I wanted this image to just be 1-point perspective, because like I said earlier, a series of videos where I'm making cityscapes with a variety of different types of perspective. Now, the way that I could have changed this up with another thumbnail, I wound up only drawing on one of the thumbnails and selected that as the composition that I wanted, because I looked at it, I'm like, yep, that's the imagery that I have in my head of the image, and so why not just work with it? I could have had, instead of the vanishing point for 1-point perspective, to be basically right on the horizon line. Instead of that, like if I were to translate this over to curvilinear or fisheye perspective terminology, I could have had the north vanishing point be the basically either the nadir or the zenith, but it wouldn't have had quite the same effect. I mean, it wouldn't be showing off the city. It would be kind of just showing some guy dangling off of a rope on the side of a building. That's basically all that it would have shown. And I think about it, and the biggest disappointment that I have, other than the fact that I wasted a ton of time with a bunch of failed measurements, is that this image does not have a story. And I mean, towards the end of working on this image, I thought about, okay, well, maybe I could have an enemy off in the distance on a different rooftop. But I thought about that for a little bit, and I'm like, no, that wasn't planned from the very beginning, and plus I was kind of running out of time to work on this image. And so with the deadline kind of looming over me, knowing that, hey, yeah, I still need to edit and record a voiceover and stay up all night to finish, I need to make sure that this video actually gets out on time, and so I decided not to include another character in on the scene. Maybe that's laziness on my part, but I don't know. If there was a story to this, maybe this is like the character just doing reconnaissance in a new city or something like that, where maybe humans have gone over to another planet. Like, this is the same sort of little universe that I've kind of sort of created, at least visually speaking. I've created it where it's kind of like Stargate. They go through these portals that go from planet to planet, and yeah, maybe this is a city that humans have built where they're colonizing an alien world, and he's just doing reconnaissance or something. The whole time while working on this, I was listening to the first book in the Dark Operator series inside of Galaxy's Edge, and I don't know, for some reason this image, like here he is, he's going to this alien planet, and I don't know, the imagery of the place kind of, at least inside of the book, kind of felt very similar to kind of Earth. And so I kind of wanted to illustrate an image that kind of got me to think of the sort of imagery that he was kind of describing inside of the book. So yeah, kind of weird how I came up with the composition and all that. I mean, it's not really fan art. It's just me kind of being letting my environment kind of help me come up with what the image is. And a lot of the book is the character enjoying his experience in the scenery and such like that. And so, you know, I was trying to enjoy the scenery that I was creating that doesn't really exist. You know, I was thinking about maybe putting windows on this wall that I'm currently working on, but that never really happened. And some of the difficulty is, at least for me, when I'm making a city, is that I've never been to something like New York City or something like that. I mean, I've been up to Salt Lake City, and I guess they have some buildings that are fairly tall. I guess they would qualify as being skyscrapers. But then again, I've never been to some place like New York and had any basis of comparison. So maybe what I would call a skyscraper would be a ridiculous piece of nonsense to somebody from New York. I don't know. So, like, my visual library on what qualifies as being a proper skyscraper is somewhat limited. It's limited to mostly just Hollywood and just comic books. And so maybe there should be windows here. I was thinking, you know, I don't know. Sometimes there's faces to a skyscraper, I think, that don't have windows. But is that only down an alleyway? I genuinely don't know. So I don't know. It's maybe the fact that it's foreshortened, but you saw that I drew out all of these vertical measurements. One of them is orange and one of them is blue. Well, it's more than just one vertical lines, but a whole bunch of orange and a whole bunch of blue vertical lines going down. And these are specific measurements because you know, the orange represents one set of staggered courses of brick, and then the other one, the blue, represents the other grouping of different courses of brick, because they're staggered. That, I don't know if I'm making sense. Like, if you don't know what staggered means in terms of laying brick, then I don't know how to help guide you to understand, other than you need to Google it and find out, or just look at a bunch of brick and kind of think, oh, okay, yeah, that's how brick is made, or at least that's how brick is laid, how they lay it into becoming a building and such. I kept looking up on Google Images a few buildings, and you'll see a few references pop up on the screen a little bit, and I was kind of loosely inspired by these images. And so, yeah, I don't know. To some extent, I kind of felt like it added a heck of a lot more work to do. And here I was thinking, heck, I'm coming up on the deadline, and I keep adding extra work for myself. But I kept on adding that extra work simply because I thought maybe it might pay off. Maybe it might make the image look a little bit more rewarding to look at, give the people more of a reason to look at it, in terms of, there's more detail, more stuff, and to look at least. And so that was my motivating decisions behind that. And so I decided that with this building that there'd be like kind of like a condo where there'd be an upstairs area. There's a little bit of somewhat of a balcony that looks down onto another balcony. And I kind of debated, hey, should I have a swimming pool on the lower balcony that kind of extends out a little bit? But I kind of just decided against that. And since earlier you saw the first face of the building, the first building that I drew, the first face, is facing right at us, the front face of the building, since it's 1 point perspective. I went ahead and pretty much made it a complete silhouette. And so I decided, okay, well, I'll play around with that concept. And so there are some, it's like a checkerboard to some extent. And so some objects, they have a little bit of a border, a white border around them, while other objects, instead of having a white border around them, they're just white. And so that's, such as the railing. You'll notice that the railing doesn't have a white border around it. I just made the railing white. And I've seen people like Frank Miller do things like that. If you're not familiar with Frank Miller's artwork, he made Sin City, he made The Dark Knight Returns, stuff like that. He's had a very successful career to the point to where nowadays he hasn't really produced very good work anymore, but there was a period in time where he's made some great stuff. Now this face that I'm working on right here, now normally I don't rotate the canvas inside of these videos because I feel like maybe it confuses you guys. From the very beginning I decided I want this image to have a bit of a Dutch angle, and so that posed a number of problems, but that's fine. But this face, this left face to this building, it posed a lot of problems, and I kept trying to figure out ways to get around the issue that it is so foreshortened. How do I put windows on this face and make sure that they look right? And I tried a number of things. Like you can see, I already tried 2 different attempts right there. And then I try, okay, well, what if my measurements are done a ways, much closer to the vanishing point, and then I just bring my vertical lines down? What happens then? And I thought maybe I might be able to make heads and tails of what I'm doing then, but the problem is when you start measuring things, or at least even just once you start putting the horizontal measurement lines in, it starts getting really confusing in and of itself. And so this is something that I wound up scrapping as well. It just didn't wind up looking right. And so you can see me just deleting it right there. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, what if I create a new document and then I just create something that kind of might be able to represent windows? And so I go ahead and I transform it into place, but the problem is that the lines were too thin. And so when I wound up transforming it and warping it to kind of sort of fit with the perspective, it wound up making those lines nearly non-existent. So I went ahead and tried it again with thicker lines, and you can see that the lines were still kind of wonky. It didn't really quite work out very well. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll just darken these lines. But the thing is since it wasn't created with the vanishing point, the line work that's been transformed to kind of go kind of like the perspective inside of the scene, it's still kind of screwed up because it's not perfect. And so me trying to trace that just didn't quite work out. Ultimately, I think if I were to do it again, I think I would do things much more impressionistically when I have a face that is just so foreshortened, it just becomes kind of ridiculous. That's what I think I'm going to do the next time I wind up running into a situation like that. And every once in a while, I see an image of some building, possibly in the Bronx or something like that. Maybe it's just, the Daredevil comics made by Frank Miller. There's like a water tower on the top of a skyscraper. I have no idea why these are on top of skyscrapers or why they were. Is that something that's been phased out? I don't know. Like, if you live in New York, do you still see these weird water containers? At least I'm assuming they contain water. Like, it's not like they're going to contain something like gasoline. That would make no sense, and that would just be psychotic. So, like, I don't know what the point of this is. I mean, it's not like, hey, it's time to take a shower. I wonder if that water supply up the top of the building, the roof of this giant building, is it full? I mean, why would they need water there? I mean, is it like a government mandate in case like the water supply dries up or something? I don't know. I have no idea why those exist, and if that is the reason why they exist, in case there's some sort of emergency, like maybe there's like, I don't know, like an earthquake or something, and so they're, the plumbing's been damaged. Is there enough of those to make sure that like there's enough water supply for the entire city for like a month? And if not, then for how long? I don't know. Like, these are questions that I've always asked myself, and maybe it's the answer's possibly just like, no, well, duh, of course the answer is this. But I don't know. I don't come from New York. I have no idea. I'm just drawing kind of what I think New York looks like based off of the images that I've seen in the past. This isn't like firsthand knowledge, but as I continue with this series of videos of me working on cityscapes and such like that, I'm planning on doing a bit more research and possibly even basing it on real locations to some extent. Like, I don't want to actually lay out a real city, but actually like have a specific location in mind next time, and just look at the architecture and kind of study it a little bit more, instead of just kind of jumping the gun. Okay, this is what I want, this, and just having no idea what it is that I'm going to really draw. I mean, like, you can kind of see me just coming up with stuff. I put this air conditioning unit on top of a building. I have no idea if there's more stuff that needs to be up there or not. I don't. Yeah, it's kind of weird because I just. This is where a lack of knowledge of a place can really kind of make an image suffer, and I have no idea if I've succeeded in terms, like, to the average Joe that's not living in New York. They're going to look at this image and they're going to say, yeah, that looks like a proper city. That looks pretty good. But for someone who actually lives in New York, I have no idea if they're going to look at it and scoff and go, that's not accurate at all. That's kind of stupid, actually. I have no idea if I'm going to get a reaction like that. Now, this little dome that I put up here after the fact, I mean, like, a lot of it's just kind of free-handed, but and not done with the strictest sort of rules or ideas, I guess. And after the fact, I kind of started thinking, yeah, I should have used a few more different techniques to kind of make sure that looks perfect. But as I look at it, it looks okay. Yeah, so here I'm laying out like a whole bunch of horizontal and then vertical lines for the windows. You can kind of see me coming up with all of that. And as I continued making the windows, like I noticed that I kept being really strict on making X's, but you don't actually need a 100% X, like like you don't need to have an X necessarily. If you find center on an object and then you carry that center on all the way through, all you need to do is make one line that goes from one corner to the other, and where it intersects with that center, that basically you know where to change direction or draw your perpendicular line. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but yeah, there are easier ways to draw this image, and sometimes it just takes you doing things the really slow route a couple hundred times to just kind of be like, oh gosh, there's got to be a faster way, and then you think about it and you're like, oh yeah, no, duh, of course there's a faster way, and it's this. And so I've I appreciate this image at least to some extent, because I kind of feel like I have managed to kind of use a technique that I knew already existed, but most of the time I forget that particular technique exists. And so this gave me the opportunity, for the sake of saving time, to use that technique so that I might not forget it the next time I draw an image, if that all makes sense. Like I don't like, sometimes you'll know about a technique and it's just like you'll use it here and there, but then you'll draw an image that's completely different from most of your other images, like a cityscape. Like maybe you don't draw cityscapes very often, and then it's like, man, this is just taking so long, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that technique will speed me up. As I started drawing the buildings further off, I started to kind of reduce the amount of measurements that were needed. I got a lot more impressionistic, and a lot of my original sketch work, where it's just like, okay, it's pretty much just a box, I wound up kind of keeping that instead of trying to make billions and billions and billions of lines everywhere. And like here, this is what I'm talking about. Like, well, no, maybe not. Maybe that's not what I'm talking about. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, that right there, that building, it's more impressionistic, but it's a lot more simplistic than trying to have like a window, and then there's like a space in between that window and then the next window. That takes forever. But generally, I feel as though I've drawn out a whole bunch of buildings that I have seen before in the past, and so like it should be about spot on. While I was drawing out this particular building, I was thinking, okay, I need to wrap this up, but this building is a lot closer than a lot of the other buildings that I've drawn, so I need to at least do something to try and make this building look like it has details. So I thought, okay, well, maybe just something like a windowsill underneath each and every single window. And then after I wound up, doing it, I thought, okay, that would just be like a small little thing. But after I started doing it, it kind of made me want to just punch myself in the face, because it wasn't just a small little thing. So, yeah, you can see me actually pulling up references to anatomy. I feel as though I got the anatomy somewhat fairly accurate. And there's a lot of times where, like, the sort of imagery that you would get for, like, a medical doctor, like, it includes, like, visuals that are kind of confusing, at least to me, where it's like, where it's not really, like, where the muscle tissue turns white or something like that. Maybe that's not muscle tissue. Maybe that's just fat or something, and so they make it white. And so for some reason that just kind of confuses me. It's like, no, I just want to know where the muscles are. And so whenever I go searching for images to teach me anatomy, I'm either looking for bodybuilders or I'm looking for something like that is some sort of illustration or a computer model that actually shows me the muscles or something like that. I had a number of attempts with this guy's legs, or at least his feet, and so I wound up really just kind of thinking, okay, combat boots or something, and so I really just kept on looking and looking and looking. It looks like it just is a blink of an eye, but I wound up looking for quite a while to kind of sort of get a camera angle that's somewhat what I needed as a reference in order to see how a combat boot would be at that angle. At this point, I just applied a gradient map to my background, and just, you know, I'm not erasing my background where it overlays with my character. I just wound up using a layer mask just simply because I did all that work and I didn't want to just erase it. So yeah, here I'm just doing some final touches, and the final image will be coming up onto the screen right about now-ish. You'll see. And yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, I drew out the blade that he's holding because this is that Stargate meets Star Wars universe. So here it is. Like I said, I guess it's an image where a guy's doing reconnaissance, and generally, pretty much everything that I've been saying. Let me know if you feel as though this is a fairly accurate image of New York, and you happen to be from New York, and even if you're not, just let me know. What do you think? Anyhow, I like it, even though I have no basis of comparison, really. Anyways, guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you guys would like to get more notifications from me, feel free to join my Discord. If you'd like to support this channel, feel free to purchase one of my t-shirts. There's a link to my Teespring in the video description below where you can purchase one of my t-shirts. Any support would be much appreciated. And if you've enjoyed this content and would like to see more, feel free to click on anything else that's appearing on the screen right now. Thank you very much for your time.